consumer law is very document intensive. Like there's credit reports, there's bank statements, there's contracts, there's things like that. So I dump all my documents in there, what I get from the other side, what I have from my client, and it allows me to have it as a repository. That's like, I have all my documents in there, just like any kind of document repository. And then of course it'll OCR all those documents, no great shakes there. Lots of things will do that. But I can then create sort of what I would call a task. Like I want to learn about, like, let's just say I want to kind of learn what this case is really about so I can start to put together a complaint.
Mm-hmm.
I could create a task, throw the relevant documents into that task, and just start asking it questions, just like you would ChatGPT. It's good. Of course, it's all, you're in a closed database. So nothing that you're doing, importantly is being shared with the outside world. It's going to confine most of its responses to extracting that and helping me kind of working with it as a partner, kind of put that story together. And kind of once you have that story together, it sort of informs your discovery and everything else you do. So I use it in kind of an unorthodox way like that to sort of pull the story out. And then once I've got the pieces of the story, then I can look for the evidence to support it. And that's kind of my working process.
Interesting. Well, I love that you keep saying the key thing is story, because in law, I feel like there's probably, there's a lot of like technical information that is being shared to all the parties. And one framing device that makes things simple is the, storytelling, which I understand that you seem to be a very big believer in storytelling. And, the book that you mentioned, what's his name? Eliyahu M. Goldrat's book and your own book.
Yeah.
And just the way you work is all through storytelling, right? It's a good
That's
technique.
I think that in almost any profession that's almost all we do. Humans just don't learn other ways. Now you learn math and you have a way of learning that, and it's by repetition and by understanding. But generally, like almost any sort of a information, like that's what we've been wired for, however long we've been on this earth to like understand things in that way. And if you don't give somebody a story, they'll create one in their own head to explain what happened. And so, we just are very flawed in that. That's how we learn things, or for good or bad. I don't know if that's a flaw. And we have all these kind of cognitive biases and things that we're susceptible to as well. But, in the old days, I think maybe people are realizing this now. If you're trying to convince somebody of something, or convince it, to say it's a jury, we'll pretend we don't get put in arbitration all the time and we're going to a jury. You just throw a bunch of data up in front of them. They can't make anything out of that. So they're going to make a story out of that. If you just throw up like, kind of like, well, here's some facts, right? Without like a narrative to bind it, they'll just make a story out of that too.
Yeah.
And if you, so that's just how people learn things. And so you have to kind of put it in what you might as well, since they have a square shaped hole in their head, you got to make it a square, to put in there. And because there's no way they're just going to make one anyway. And so you want it to be, as much as you can, the version that you want, to be the, which hopefully the truth, but you want them to accept. And it's not, I don't think it's manipulative, but I just think it's acknowledging how humans really learn things. So I kind of talked off topic. It really, really is. I think what I was going to say is, like, in law school, you're kind of taught maybe on this sort of Greek model of like, well, you make a rational argument, and if your argument is logically coherent, then that is the better argument. And, if we were all computers, I think that would be true. But, even judges are human beings, right? And so that's not how they process things. They, if we look at politics and things like that, what works? Good story, simplicity, repetition. You three best things that you can say it said over and over and over again, the same way, different ways, every way, because that's sort of how people are more influenced. If there's anything that the last 30 years in America has taught us, is like, people aren't rational actors. It's not, give them the facts and they'll, and the logic, and they'll do, certain things. It's just like, and I think both sides politically, you can see how much it's evolved if you go back and look at an old debate from, like 30 years ago, where it's very almost like classic debating, it's polite and all that stuff. And it's regrettable in a lot of ways that we've lost that, but it's just people getting asked a question that they don't answer, and they just go back to like 4 talking points, over and over and over again. And the terrifying and true part of that is like, well, that works. And that's how people decide things. They get 3 or 4 things in their head. There's a great trial lawyer named Mark Mandel, who I think is also up from your neck of the woods, who, is big into something called case framing. And what he says is like, people pick out like 3 or 4 issues in a case that they just can't get over. Like if you go back and talk to a jury after it's over, they'll go, I just can't get over the fact that so-and-so did something. And they'll seize on 3 or 4 things. And those will be the things that really drive the whole case. So, acknowledging the reality of the situation, I think we have to persuade like humans in caves, 10,000 years ago did, which is with storytelling,
Wow. Love that. That's so amazing. That's a great like topic and a great way to go about, I guess, all business and lawyer business, and just storytelling is your friend with all lawyer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And then the interesting thing is that, because AI, and the other tool I use that I really like is Perplexity, which is, a more of a sort of chat GPT-ish, but it's very user friendly. I just prefer it.